not doing it for money. You're not doing it for prestige or to have power over people. But you're doing it because you feel like you can serve the Lord in an even better way as an elder, and you want to be. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong to aspire to do that. And so we're very proud of him. But somebody has to put in the light bulbs, that's right. And that's why I've taught this. In fact, when I taught this, all this material, when, let's see, 4 years ago when I was put in as an elder, I taught it first, because we put in elders and deacons. And I was talking about the deacon's role, and I was talking about how they have to be leaders too, because over in Acts 6, when they selected 7, they had all the spiritual qualifications, but then they were supposed to take the food to the widows, okay? Well, did they just take the food off over the widows and drop it off and say, here's your food, take off? No. There was a responsibility spiritually to meet some of the emotional and spiritual needs as well as the food. Because you're going to go in there and say, we're sorry, we have neglected you. What else can we do for you? And they're going to talk to them and try to somehow make sure they're meeting their spiritual and emotional needs as well as their... So that's a part of leadership. Not only that, but you talk about a congregation of maybe somewhere in the area of 10 to 15,000 members. 7 deacons are going to feed, because you're probably looking at widows, and somewhere, at least maybe somewhere in the 1,000 range. Seems amazing, doesn't it? A lot of widows back in those days because they couldn't get jobs. They didn't have a husband, they're in bad shape. And so you're talking about 7 deacons taking care of maybe 1,000 widows or 1,500 widows. You've got to have leadership to do that. You've got to delegate. So you see, the deacons we have to realize deacons need to have leadership ability too, and they need to have leadership responsibility. So I taught that, and we lost 2 deacons. And they're good men, bless their hearts. They were honest with me, but they said, I don't think we can be a leader. I said, well, if you want to be a deacon here, I think you ought to be. And they decided not to. So, it's one of those things, but I think we have to lift our leadership up to a certain level, not so much of prestige, but of expectation, but of performance, but of being willing to be the kind of shepherds that we expect them to be. So that guy's put the number on me already. And the other elders. We can't fail him now. We can't fail him now. Because he's a young rising star, so to speak. I mean, he's going to be a good man, a good leader, and a deacon someday, maybe an elder someday. We can't fail him now. But you see, that doesn't happen in every congregation. Because if you're in a positional kind of congregation where they're positional leaders, then what do these young men aspire to be? Positional leaders. You see, that's all they see. And then we have the same cycle going over and over and around and around. And that's why we're the fix we're in. Okay, probably longer explanations than you expect or answers than you expect, but anyway, get me going on this stuff. Yes?
Could you elaborate on relational? I've heard so much positional and I'm not really getting what relational means.
Well, relational means, first of all, that I have a sense of where my authority lies, and I express it. For instance, if I'm a positional leader, that means I really believe that my authority lies in the fact that I have the position. You see, I have the office. Well, by the way, the word office is not in the Greek there at all. If you look at the qualifications for elders and deacons, there's no word for office there at all. There's a word for work, but we like the word office, though. We don't like the word work. Who wants to work anyway? I just have office. I don't have to work, but I've got office. I don't want to work. So, I'm being facetious, but that's kind of what happens. But if I have an office, then I have authority from that office, and I can execute it. But that's in contrast to what Jesus talked about in Matthew 20 when he said, if you're going to be a leader, if you're going to be first in the kingdom, you've got to be last. You've got to be a slave. Well, how do you be a slave? How can you be a slave and have an office holder? Or be an office holder in the same kind of a context? You can't. So the relational leader then, and were you here when I talked about John 13? Okay. That's an example, a perfect example of Jesus not being able to get the point across through edict or sermons. You see, and he did all that. He offered some edicts to him, he offered some commands, he offered some sermons to him. Didn't work. So if it had been me, probably, and I'm a positional thinking, fire the whole lot, get rid of them. They're not paying attention. I've preached 2 sermons already on leadership, and look at them, they're fighting and fussing during the Lord's Supper. So I would fire, or I would have a scorching sermon for them. Oh boy, would I have a scorching. I would rip their hides, boy, in a sermon. That's going to do a lot of good, right? I'll probably lose half my apostles. Then they walk out the door. That's it. But that doesn't do any good, does it? No matter how true you are and how right you are, it doesn't do any good because that's not leadership. We don't want to listen to people that are skinning our hide from the pulpit, do we? We may deserve it, but we don't want to hear that. We want somebody that says, kind of like Bill Clinton. I don't want to be Bill Clinton. I feel your pain, see? And there's some truth to that. I think he did it somewhat hypocritically, but I don't want to get into politics in here, but there's something true to that, you know. If you're in my congregation and I'm your shepherd, I want to feel your pain. I want to identify with it. That's exactly what Nehemiah did. And he did it with a city that he'd never seen. He did it with the people who had sinned that he hasn't been a part of that sin. But he identified with them. And he felt for them. And so that's the kind of relational kind of thinking we're talking about. And when I am that kind of a relational leader, when I'm kind of a leader, then people say, you know, Ken Wilson, he's meeting the other qualifications to be an elder, okay. And he's a spiritual man, and he's got a good Bible knowledge and all that, but I want to follow him. Why? Because, first of all, I respect him. Secondly, he cares about me. Just that simple. And he'll be there to help me when I need it. I could go to him to ask for advice. I remember one time I've been doing some counseling with a lady because she had gone to one of our elders. Good man, bless his heart and all that. She'd been a member of the congregation for some time, she and her husband, and he'd done some preaching there, so they were a highly respected couple. And one day we find out that they're getting a divorce. And he's running off with another woman. And this poor gal, I mean, she's devastated. And they're up in their 40s, you know, mid-40s. And so one of the elders thought, well, you know, I need to bring her in and talk to her. So he brings her into the office, the elder's office, and sits down with her and says, I know that he's known her forever. First words out of his mouth, I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe you guys are getting divorced. Now, is there anything wrong with that? It devastated her. She didn't go back. She didn't go back because right away the tone was, I'm judging you. How can you let something like this happen? And in reality, it wasn't her fault. You know, it was mostly his fault. But you see the tone says, I'm being critical of you. I'm judging you. And it devastated. She didn't went back. She came later on back to me for counseling, but it's just that positional kind of mindset. And it's a programmed belief system that says, my job is to have authority over this congregation and make sure everything runs smooth. Whereas the relational leader says, my job and my authority lies in not only meeting the qualifications, but in knowing the people. Like that Palestinian shepherd. I sleep with them, I eat with them, I talk to them, I heal them. That's what works, that's relational. And the American sheep herder is positional. He probably cares about his sheep, but why does he care about his sheep? Because they bring in money. That's the difference between a body, an organism, that we'll talk about tomorrow in 1 Corinthians 12, that is interdependent. And an organism, an organization or an institution that's not. An organization, all the members are working towards the same goal. That's true. Otherwise it wouldn't work. But in that organization, with the members working towards, or the workers working towards a common goal, they don't depend on one another to get their part of that job done. You see? We got to see that difference. Because in an organization, I worked at a major corporation, a head office in a major corporation, and I've seen all of that, how that works. And so in an organization, all the workers are working towards a common goal, sell the product. But I'm here as a worker, here's a worker over here. This worker doesn't depend upon me to get his job done. You see? He can get his job done without me. But in an organism, it's different. Everybody depends upon one another. It's interdependent. And that means the whole body can't function unless it's interdependent. The whole body can't function unless all of us are dependent on one another. All of us are working together. That's a totally different concept than a corporation or an institution. And today we have movements going on that try to get the church to be an institution. Well, what happens when you become an institution? You start to get away from the interdependency of the body.